Righty. So welcome everyone to Life After Seminary, Women Serving in Ministry. I'm Reverend Rebecca Burrow, founder and CEO of Building Reconciliation, Inclusion, Diversity, and Gender Equity. I also serve in ministry at St. John Primitive Baptist Church. My guest this evening is my sister girlfriend, Reverend Anastasia Holman. Now, Anastasia was ordained a deacon in 2010 and an elder in 2012 in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. That's a mouthful, just like the name of my business. She currently serves on the ministerial staff at Caldwell Chapel AME Zion Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. Anastasia is educated with a Bachelor of Science degree from Indiana State University and a MBA or Master of Business Administration degree from Indiana Wesleyan. And she also earned her MDiv from Christian Theological Seminary, graduating cum laude. And we were both Martin Luther King Jr. scholars. Amen. Thank God for that. That helps us make it through school. She was also, Anastasia is also the first person of color or African-American woman to be certified as an associate educator as an Association for Clinical Pastoral Education in the IU health system. So, and I can't forget that she is married to Tony Holman, and they've been married for 25 years, and her beautiful daughters, Alexandra and Ashley, both of them college students. So I want to thank Anastasia for joining me tonight, and I'm just delighted that we can have this conversation. I know we do this from time to time over the phone and what have you. So I'm just glad that we're able to have this conversation. So before I go into the conversation, is there anything you want to add to all that I've said about you?
I also want to mention that I am not just an associate, but a certified educator for ACPE, Association for Clinical Pastoral Education. I serve on their certification commission, and so I help other students get through the process of certification. And I am the director of spiritual education for IU Health System. And so I'm just glad to be here today. It is an honor, and whenever we can catch up is just a great time. And so I know we only have an hour, and we know we can move way beyond that. So I'm glad to be here this evening.
All right. Well, thank you. So since we only have an hour, I won't prolong us diving right in. And I want to start when I lost you, Anastasia. Okay, there you are. All right. I want to start January 2005. Hey, Mom, my mother just joined. 2005, when we entered our first semester at Christian Theological Seminary in pursuit of our Master of Divinity degree. And I remember walking into orientation to that big common area, and I think there was probably about 65 or 70 students. We had a huge class that year that joined us, and I remember seeing you way across the other side of the room, because it was a pretty large room. And for some reason, just seeing you, I thought, maybe that's somebody I can get to know, because walking in there, you immediately feel lonely. It's frightening, and fear and trepidation had already kicked in. And so on break, it just so happened that we ended up in the restroom at the same time, and we introduced ourselves to one another and discovered that our pastors at the time were great friends. And from there, we just connected. And so I remember just thinking, this is a beautiful person with such a great spirit. And I was so thankful to God that he brought you into my life right there at the beginning of seminary, because at that point, I just needed to know that I could connect with somebody, because it was a frightening experience.
Yes. I felt the same way. Well, first of all, after all of the writing and assignments and talking about plagiarism, by the time it was break, I was getting ready to walk out the door. I was probably making my pit stop at the restroom before I went to my car. And then I saw you and we talked, and that actually helped me get grounded and just stay put and see what the rest of the day had. And I do want to say I'm grateful because you became more than just a seminary peer. You actually became family
Yes.
and
Yes.
somebody who's here for the journey. And I'm excited even about this conversation because, it's hard to find women in ministry
Mm-hmm.
that are connected for the journey,
Mm-hmm.
that are genuinely interested, really want to engage deeper besides the surface level, and want to empower.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that in our relationship, not only a friend, but I could call you my sister.
Yes.
And we could talk about our struggles through ministry. So that just became a safe, sacred space.
Yeah.
And it continues to be throughout this today still. So I'm just grateful for our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation this evening, well, there's a lot of different reasons. Of course, one, that it aligns with the organization that I've been blessed to found and be the CEO of. The gender equity piece and the inclusion piece, both are really significant for women that are entering in ministry. But the other piece is, I hope that this conversation can help bless other, not just women, but also brothers or anybody that's on a journey in life and trying to figure out how to navigate some of the challenges and some of the barriers and things that present themselves as you're trying to pursue what God has ordained in you, and trying to make sure that you are allowing God to order your steps, because one of the difficulties I found even during seminary was trying to figure out, okay, God, now I'm here. Now what? I'm learning, I'm studying, and all this stuff I mean, from the theology pieces to the ethics pieces, the history pieces, everything that you're learning in seminary is so much different than what you're learning when you're pursuing your other graduate degrees or bachelor's degrees, because it's challenging your faith. It's challenging everything that you believe about God and your worldview, your social context, just everything. And so when when I was in seminary, I'm like, Lord, some of this goes against everything that I've learned, that I was trained as a child. So my hope is that as we talk tonight, that people will hear the struggle, but also experience those victories that we share, because God knows God has really been good to us and has really blessed us through many dangers, toils, and snares. We have overcome a lot and still have a long way to go, because there's so much ministry that God has instilled in us.
And as you said, that reminds me of what I keep hearing even to this day, that I didn't know then, but then when I did my CPE work, and even now, trust God and trust the process. And so I was one of those people who always had to know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, trust God and trust the process. And had I known that someone would have, first of all, just told me I've been in ministry, let alone going to seminary, let alone doing chaplaincy work, chaplaincy education, I probably would have said, no, you had the wrong person. And so, trust God and trust the process. And you're right, victory comes through trusting God and trusting the process. And I don't know where I will end up or what will happen. And yet I have, over the years, just really began to have a deeper trust in God and just trusting the process, and just kind of trying to relax and have some fun and enjoy God and enjoy what God has called me to do without having to know what the next step is. And that is so freeing. But on that first day of seminary, I tell you, I was terrified. So I'm grateful we did make it. And I know your favorite class, I think, was theology.
Love some systematic theology.
Tell us.
Actually, any of the theology courses, systematic theology, process theology, liberation theology, Murista theology. I was so hungry for it. And I tell you why. Because when we arrived in seminary, for me, I know that I grew up on somehow theology. Somehow God is going to make a way. That was the theology that I grew up on, and I wasn't ashamed about it either, because and it continues to be my theology for today. But I wanted to know how to think, how to articulate what I believed about God, and learning how to process my theology and understanding systematic theology, and just to be able to be in conversation with other theologians about their belief about God and hear what they were saying, and to understand that didn't necessarily mean that I changed my belief about God, but it helped me to be able to engage in conversation and increase my knowledge in area, so that when I'm preaching to people now, even when I'm preaching, I can hear some of that, what people are thinking out in the pews. Because everybody that comes to church on Sunday morning, even if they attend your church, don't necessarily have the same beliefs, about God. And so I know when we were in seminary, and this is, look, I'm gonna say it like my pastor say sometimes, this is gonna mess with your theology. So if you ain't ready, I'm telling y'all now, when we were in seminary, we had to learn how to use inclusive language when we talked about God. And I remember the first time they tried to get me to say something about God being she. I'm like, oh, y'all gonna have to work a little while on that. But the other piece is what I learned, and what I began to appreciate, is that we assign God a gender.
Yeah.
But yet we will always say that God is our everything.
Yes.
But we operate saying God is he, or he is. That's how we typically speak about God. So those are the things that challenged me in seminary, but I'm glad for the challenge, because it helped me think about my belief in God and why I believe what I believe about God.
And so for me,
History.
History was theology was not my favorite. And what is amazing, though, while it was not my favorite, I find myself using it a lot with students. And I had to even write a theology theory paper for my certification process, and have claimed womanist theology as the voice that helps me to articulate my God talk and theology. And there was someone who, every time I preach, I imagine him showing up to the service, and that would be Dr. Burrow with that inclusive language, saying, I'll get you because you have an ethical appointment to make sure that you include everyone when you're preaching. And so I find myself actually in church saying God's self, and not him, not her, but God's self, so that I can also be aware that people come from different walks of life, and they bring baggage and hurt and holes. And so if I say her for one person, it has an issue. If I say him for somebody else, a father or mother, it's an issue. So I just stick with God's self, or yes, God does, or so I try to do some of that in the church. But I loved church history. In fact, I thought I was going to go and get my PhD in church history, and God had another plan. And it was actually, it took everything. It took church history, Dr. Allen in preaching, and then systemic theology all coming together. But it was Dr. Allen who sat in a systematic theology class and said, you preach your systematic theology. And it clicked. Before then, I was like, what is systematic theology? I remember asking one professor, do you have a dummies for Tillich? So,
right. Paul Tillich. Yeah.
And now I actually use Paul Tillich's language in with students, ground of being, because that way I can cover it with everybody.
Right.
For in chaplaincy, as we say, it was a stomping, it was the building block. CTS was the building block because students come from everywhere and have all kind of different beliefs. We serve all people in the hospital with all kinds of different beliefs. So CTS was just a forming ground as a woman in ministry, and I learned a lot. And so I take those relationships and what I've learned into what I'm doing today. And it is, God is so awesome, this to be here and to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's been a little while now since we've been out of seminary. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question about seminary, and then we'll move on. But let's see. We mentioned early on that you and I both were fortunate to be Martin Luther King Jr. scholars, which helped pay for our education and provided stipends. Praise Jesus. But the other thing is that you also became the first African-American woman at seminary to receive the history. Tell me exactly what it was.
It was the Church History Award in Academic Excellence. And so it was a surprise.
Right.
It was definitely a surprise. And I love church history. And I worked at it. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to know the beginnings to the end. I really worked hard and studied. I loved learning, and which is no surprise, but I just loved learning. And even when it was challenged, I would get in the books, I would study, I would write. I had close relationships with Dr. Somerville and Dr. C, who were both history professors. And so I would spend time just trying to soak up all of the history that I could possibly. And it has helped the preaching, the what, when, where, how model that was, when you look into history, that's what you're looking for. And it was actually in those classes that I began to learn about African American and women.
Yes.
And women and the role that they played in all of the ministry that go unaccounted for. Like if it wasn't for the woman, there's a book. If it wasn't for the woman.
Hold up, wait a minute. Okay.
If it wasn't for the woman.
Yes.
It amazed me because I didn't get this in undergraduate. I didn't get it in regular school. And I even gave the book The Freedom Riders to my children when they were in elementary and junior high. Said, read this. As I was learning, I was passing it on to change the trajectory so that they would know that they have a voice and they have power and there are things that they can do to stand up against injustice. And so that they had their own ministry. So I loved history. We could stay on that forever.
It's funny because when I think about some of my favorite professors there, Dr. Wilma Bailey. Oh my gosh, that lady, such a brilliant mind. I mean, she made the Second Testament, the Old Testament, come to life in a way that I had not experienced before. Dr. Allen, going through all those exegesis classes with him, I mean, just absolutely amazing. And then the late Dr. Lorna Shoemaker made reading the Black Plague one, I mean, and Dr. Frank Birch Brown. I mean, this guy brought the actual church itself, the building, the structure, the architect, everything about it, the worship and everything. He brought it to life. So I appreciate, there's so many folks that I appreciate that sold into us. And I cannot forget Dr. Edward Wheeler, our seminary professor, president. He sold greatly into, I think, every student life at CTS. I know that you could walk into the seminary and, walk in, the office was open, and there was plenty of days I went into that office and sat there and he prayed with me. And I mean, Dr. Wheeler, when he prayed, every now and again he'd cut your finger because he's holding your hand so tight, but he would pray you through some stuff. And so I was so appreciative of that but I'm thinking of a couple of books that I came across because of professors like Dr. Allen. One of them that he recommended and that was a blessing to me was this one here. Women, if you're out there, saved from silence, finding women's voice in preaching, it says, but it's also helping you find your voice just in life in general, and helping you navigate wherever you might be in ministry or wherever you might be, even in just your regular job. This book was just an absolute blessing to me. And this one, Anastasia, do you remember when we used to be able to get books off that little bookshelf? They would sell books for like 25 cents, 50 cents or whatever, that they were taken out of the library.
The card.
This book right here, I recommend it all the time to women. Women's Ways of Knowing. You're talking about getting to know yourself. So those are just a few of the great things that happened for me in seminary. But I want to now get to a place where now we're leaving seminary. I left a year before you because I had to graduate. I couldn't wait any longer. But we had different lives at that point. You were married, you had small children. I was single, and my youngest, Ricky, I think was in junior high school or thereabouts at that point. So we had different lives, and I was able to, pile classes on. I was taking classes all year, summer, so getting those 90 hours in and out. But I remember graduation and thinking, okay, Lord, I've graduated. Now what? Now what? I've just spent, seminary is a Master of Divinity is a terminal degree. So ours was 90 credit hours, and those were 90 hard credit hours. But so I've just spent 3.5 years in seminary. Now what? Where do I go now? I was already I was serving in ministry at a church. I was the first woman licensed in ministry. In 2005 in May, on Mother's Day, I preached my trial or initial sermon. I was licensed then, but I was not ordained until after I graduated. But even with that, I'm like, now what do I do, Lord? And I don't know about you, but for me, I felt safer while in seminary at that point, because at least I knew my path for that season. So what was it like for you, graduation, when, it's like, okay.
So I just remember, one, I was grateful to graduate. When I turned in that last paper, I think people on the side of the road was like, I had me a Holy Ghost time in the car.
Yeah.
And then a while later, I was like, what is wrong with me? I recognized I was grieving. I was grieving the community. I was grieving the learning. And at that time, I was working as a part-time admin for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ there, the Minister of Reconciliation, Reverend April Johnson, and doing part-time, but yet wanting more. And that's when I decided, really start seeking out so the same thing, what am I supposed to be doing? I still didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And so, but I said, I know God, I have much respect for administrative assistants. I'm just not one. And hearing God say, go and do a residency, because I'd done my first unit of CPE, and it was like, go and do a residency. You can still discern, you can still serve, and you can also give back to your family, because that way I'm also contributing to the household. And so that was where I actually began to find my voice and ministry outside of preaching in the AME Zion Church, was to really tap into the call that I heard was teach and preach. And so going that route led me. So it didn't happen overnight. I didn't know. It was praying, discerning, and taking the next step, and taking the next step, and taking the next step. And I think it doesn't have to be all planned out. So it goes back again, trust God, trust the process. And when the doors open, don't, pray about it, but then step. it wasn't revealed at first. And I think we talked and what should I do and where should I go, and having that connection of people that's
Yeah.
safe, people that you trust,
Right.
you know, will hold you accountable, but also tell you the truth. You
Yeah.
know, I was expecting you to say, you don't need to do that, or
I did that a lot, didn't I?
you
But
know,
we
that's
did that for each other. We did that for each other. Yeah.
yes. So I was left wondering, what do I do? Because I wasn't one of the people who came in and said, yes, I know I'm going to be a pastor in a church.
Yeah.
I was the opposite. I don't want to be I didn't want to be a pastor in a church. So I'm like, God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I felt the exact same way. Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, after seminary, you know, I wanted to go immediately to get a PhD or a THD. You know, remember I was going to, I applied to Drew because I wanted to study with Tracy West and get a PhD in preaching and homiletics. And when that didn't happen, you know, I just felt like, okay, wait a minute. I thought this was supposed to be the path, God, you know? And I ended up with right after seminary, I remember my mom drove with me up to Dayton, United Theological Seminary. They were looking for a recruiter for Baptist studies, and my mom drove up with me, and I was interviewed that day, and they offered me the job. And so that would mean I was commuting between Indianapolis and Dayton. So I did that for a little while, but it was only, 20 hours a week or something like that. And I'm like, okay, real life happens, you know, you got bills and you got to handle, you have some place to live.
Right.
And so there was another opportunity that opened up for me. And that was working for the Julian Center as a advocate for victims of domestic violence. And I was actually working out of the police department there. So I did that a couple of years after seminary. And man, I tell you what, I'm thankful for all the different jobs that I had leading up to that time in the human services work. That particular job, that job stretched me to my core because it really made me start thinking about how can people treat one another so badly. And although I did not understand it then, it really aligns with what I'm doing today as I think about equity and inclusion and social justice. So how do we treat each other so bad? It definitely aligns with the human together piece, which, you know, is my my tagline for my organization and my understanding of Ubuntu, which, so how do people treat one another? But I tell you what, those 2 years of me trying to figure out, okay, Lord, what are you doing? I thought that you were calling me, you know, somewhere else, and here I am doing something that does not seem to be on the path of what I thought you called me to, nor I just earned this Master of Divinity degree. You know, I'm serving in ministry in the church, but I thought that, you know, there was something else in store. And I did not think of it as pastoring, but I definitely thought of it as serving, maybe as an executive pastor or something along those lines. So that was an absolutely interesting time. And then I discovered life after seminary is more difficult than life in seminary, because now I need to figure out, who am I as Reverend Rebecca?
Yes.
Who am I as a woman in ministry? And how do I find my voice? And that is what sent me into a chaplain residency in Florida, which was one of the hardest years for a number of reasons, but it really helped me find my voice in ministry and find my ministry identity, which is very important, especially being a preacher's kid and growing up with so many preachers around me. I mean, I have a family of preachers and pastors. And so for me, finding my voice and finding my ministry identity was crucial, and I had to leave Indianapolis in order to do so. So,
Well, and as you talk about, I resonate with you,
yeah,
saying that it was in my residency that I began to find my voice. So I'm going to put a plug in for CPE.
yeah,
I would say anybody doing ministry, at least one unit of CPE, which
yeah,
can begin to help cultivate a voice or look
yes,
at a voice, your
yeah,
voice, your power, your authority, your identity as a minister. But it was there that I realized that, the people here don't really care if I'm ordained. They
yeah,
don't care if I'm a woman. They don't care if I'm African. It's just about coming alongside them during their most difficult times. And that helped me to begin to really shape my voice, even to the point when I would encounter in the AME Zion Church, I would not be disrespectful to authority, but I was definitely aware of what God had and had not called me to,
mhm,
and I began to grow in what I had to offer, and began to know what I had to offer became from God and not necessarily humans. And then also, I said that's dangerous. Other people saw it, but once I became aware of it, that's when it really got dangerous. I mean, in a good way. And
yes,
so
yeah,
say not always on other people's agendas, but
yeah,
really aligning myself to the will of God and what God would have me to do, not even what I wanted to do sometimes, but just being aware of, do you really need to be doing this, or do you need to be focused on this? And so I think residency began to help with that. And then I went further with that process for education and really looking introspectively and how to build relationships. It just was amazing and hard at the same time.
yes, yes,
So we have parallel, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but you're one of the reasons that I even took the first unit of CPE, which was the change of trajectory for my ministry
mhm,
today. I know you went to IU Clarion West. It was
yeah, yeah,
Clarion West, but now it's IU West. And we, Reverend Beth Newton
yes,
Watson was your educator, and I asked you how it was, and I went there and followed behind you. But it was because you recommended it. I wanted to do it, but really after you said you did it, I was like, I can do that. My best friend is saying, you go and you do that.
yeah,
You do that. And it changed. So it is important for as women to find voice. Anybody in ministry. I can't preach like you. You can't preach like me.
yeah,
It's just be authentically yourself and who God is calling you to be.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to pause just a minute to let everybody know I'm trying to operate 3 different screens here. So I'm not saying hello to some people. I'm not saying hello to anybody, I guess, at this point, because I can't really see who all is in screen. But if you see me looking down, I'm trying to capture if you have questions or what have you, because Anastasia and I will definitely respond to your questions. The other thing, you hit on something right there, Anastasia. I remember early in ministry where you and I, our paths would converge sometimes, and then it seemed like we were going in different directions. And I remember when we first came to seminary, you had already been licensed and I was not licensed yet. And then I remember after seminary, you got a position as an assistant pastor, and I was still sitting back. I had graduated before you, but I was sitting back trying to figure out what the heck I was supposed to be doing. And so I want to say this to women in ministry or anybody in ministry. One of the first things you have to learn how to do is do not compare yourself to anybody in ministry. Like you just said, don't compare yourself to preachers. I mean, we had some great preachers, women and men, coming through our church at the time where I was attending. I mean, some of those folks will come through there and just lay out the word, like, and then there were other people doing things. And then, my sisters around me were doing stuff. Kim King, some of my others, Ayana Garrett, we were all doing so many different things. But what I had to learn early on was not to compare myself. to anybody. That was vital to my growth and development as a woman in ministry. And it also helped me appreciate other people in ministry and women in ministry, and understand the path that God had for me was the path God had designed for me. I love the ideal. You and I think we're pretty good preachers. We have very different preaching styles. But I don't try to preach like you, because God has gifted you with your own, with your unique preaching style. God has gifted me with the style which I preach. But I had to learn that. And that also helped me understand that I do not have to compete with other women in ministry. And that, I want to hit on that for a minute, because I think that is probably one of the most difficult things for women to accept as they are answering their call or responding to their call, and trying to navigate the small pool of opportunity, because that's what it looks like. You know, it looks like there's a small pool of opportunity until you discover that there's a big wide ocean of opportunity. But when you first are learning, you're like, okay, I must be called to do only, you know, preach or a pastor or whatever. So it looks like a small pool of opportunity. And I've been in settings where some of my brethren and some of my sisters in ministry have pitted women against one another in ministry. Have you ever had that experience?
I have had that experience. I have had women in ministry thinking that I wanted to compete or want their role and their position, and I have not. And so I have really been intentional about finding my core or my group. I'm about empowering, about helping other people claim voice. I'm about mentoring. I'm about helping you grow to be who God is calling you to be. But yes, I have seen people pit opportunities or dangle one thing. And so as you were talking, I was thinking, and wait a minute. So my theology says I serve a big God. So why is there only
Right.
a small pool of opportunity, and there are so many people suffering and who are hurting, that there is enough ministry for everyone to be doing? And so I'm grateful that this conversation is happening, and I hope that whether it is a man in ministry, a woman in ministry, that there's enough ministry to go around. And I sometimes, and I will say sometimes, the comparison thing is real, because even recently, you know, seeing people with the pandemics and seeing people create their platforms, I'm like, oh, I should be doing that. No, I shouldn't. I have other stuff to be, you know, I have other stuff that God has called me to do that. I'm glad someone is doing it, but that's not my calling. And so that can become a distraction from what God has really called me to be doing. Can I support? Can I listen? Can I pass it on when I hear something good? Yes. Do I have to be the one doing it? No. Can I use it in educational moments and say, let's watch this and engage it? There is just enough that we don't have to. And when we do, it says that, for me, I'm limiting the God that I say is so big and wonderful and gracious, that has called me to ministry, when I have to. And it's very important for me as a relationship with a woman or even a man in ministry, but I would definitely say a woman in ministry. I'm about that trust, that sisterhood, empowerment, and not everyone's going to do that. And what I have learned is to be gentle as a dove and as wise as a serpent, to be able to, you know, and use that spirit. Now, who's who?
Right.
So, and why are you coming, and why am I present with you? And sometimes it's just for a season. So yes, there is so much to say about that. I've been in churches where, you know, I've been asked, do you want to be the pastor? And it's like, no, I don't. Or I've been with a woman pastor before, and normally there would be there's a seat that the preacher would sit in, but told me I couldn't sit there because people would get confused. Now, this was a woman pastor. People would get confused. And I was like, they're not stupid. They know that we're two different people. But even that, and it was like, And I just said Spirit showed me that this morning. I mean, really, there was a conversation that I had this morning. I already knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sad. It's a waste of time, and yet it happens. So how can we as women know who we are so that when it creeps up, we can see it for what it is?
Mm-hmm.
We can still stand in our own identity and authority and still love on our fellow sister. So, yeah.
You know, it's funny because I remember when I moved here, and Ricky and Ricky moved here with me, of course. He was finishing his last year of high school, but we looked for a church, you know, and we kept going back to St. John. And I think I told you, matter of fact, when you came to visit, once you visited St. John. But I remember it took me a year before I joined St. John, because when I moved to Florida, I had so much stuff that I was carrying with me that needed to be cleansed. And I mean, just some of the spiritual baggage and different things that I really need to work through. And matter of fact, I had a very difficult time when I first moved here, and my dad was alive at the time. And Daddy said, you need to just come on back home. And I told him, I said, Dad, I can't come back home, because whatever God is doing in me, it has to be done. And God was literally breaking me. And I remember telling somebody, I said, you know, I was just going through so much. And literally, you talk about a Job experience. I said, but at least I still have my health. And I kid you not, as soon as I opened up my mouth and said that, I was sick as I don't know what, ended up in the hospital. And all I had was Ricky was here with me. I didn't know anybody in Florida or anything. And so I went through that season. But what God birthed out of that was just absolutely amazing, because what happened, there was nobody but God that could take you know, the credit for everything God was doing. Doors and things just began to open. You know, God was just giving me opportunities. And I finally I joined St. John Primitive Baptist Church after that, about a year or so, and was welcomed there in ministry. Have some great brothers and sisters there in ministry. And then, of course, I moved back to Indianapolis when I got married, and moved back to Florida a couple of years after that. And not too long after I had moved back to Florida, I was always blessed to have the pastor I had, because my pastor just allowed opportunities. You know, I never sensed ever that I had to diminish myself in ministry in order to exalt him. And I know that I've been in a situation where that's the case, but I've never experienced that with my pastor. And so when my pastor got sick, and I received a call from his administrative assistant letting me know that my pastor was sick, and he needed me and to work with the deacons to lead the church during that time. You know, it just reminded me of how God works. Now, I'm in a Primitive Baptist church, and Primitive Baptist church is not so receptive to women in ministry, but it reminds me of when you operate where God places you. If you're obedient to that, God opens the door. And when you serve with somebody in ministry that is not afraid of your giftedness and your ability, then, you know, it creates such a wonderful dynamic for the church when, you know, when they can see a woman operate in ministry alongside, you know, their pastor in ministry, if it's a male. But I had to learn so much before I really rest in the fact that God was the only one that could open doors for me. Mm-hmm. And part of that meant that I had to be stripped of everything before that happened. And so I'm just thankful for where God has me today, you know, working at, you know, developing the business and the church where I serve. I'm thankful for that. I've gone on and on. I know I've gone past my, well, I did good. I stayed within my 4 minutes. But I guess, I know I want you to talk about one of your challenges, because I remember a few of your challenges of trying to work alongside a few folks in ministry. And yeah.
I was listening to you talking. Two people, actually three people came to mind. I've had three pastors that really have been a joy
Yeah.
to work with, and I would say the first one would be my he wasn't my, how people say your father in the ministry, but he trained me in ministry and taught me about preaching, would give me critique and said, spend some time. And this was outside of seminary. I always felt more comfortable in seminary, actually, than actually sometimes the church. The community in seminary was just wonderful. That's where the opportunities opened for me. It was,
Did my camera?
there you go. I was like,
Okay.
did I lose
Okay.
it?
Okay.
So, but I had three pastors that really fed into all of them fed into my growth, because even the ones that I've had challenge with have stretched me and helped me to grow and be better. So my father in the ministry, or he trained me, he gave me advice about preaching, and he said, you don't want to be like everybody else. Everybody could get up there and say the same thing, but God is calling you to something different. And so I really spent time struggling with the word. And then Frank Thomas, his book, that Never Like to Quit Praising, normalized preaching for me. And then I had another pastor who, he just got me. He understood that my time and my calling and my ministry was just as valuable as his. And so he didn't wait till the night before to say, hey, can you do this? We had a covenant with each other that he knew, because I was actually in certification process, which was like 4 to 6 years. And so he would ask me in enough time to make sure that I could do what I want to do, but could do what I needed to do as preaching or running a Bible study. He just allowed me that freedom, and it was so peaceful. And now my current pastor, he just has a loving spirit that it is just, and understands that I'm there, but I also have a ministry. And so it is really nice. It's a blessing when you can find someone who understands she's called just like I am, and she has a ministry just like I do. The struggles, though, oh my goodness.
Along the way, yeah.
The struggles, I didn't think I was gonna make it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. And those were the places, though, that I grew the most.
Yeah.
Those were the places that I said, you know what? No, God called me. Humans did not call me. Those were the places that I had to see people for really, that even in a church, people can put you on an agenda that has nothing to do with what you should be doing. And so I have to just begin to discern and say, is this for me or not? But Reverend Rebecca Burrow, had it not been for the Lord on my side and a support group, I probably would have been like, I'm done.
Yes. Because we're getting to 7:50, I want to open up for questions, but I said at one point that, our lives in ministry have seemed to converge, and then other times they go. Now we're kind of in a similar place, because I know that you're working on your doctorate of ministry, and I want you to talk more about that. And I'm working on my doctorate of education. And so a dissertation that leadership of effectiveness and ability of African American female pastors as perceived by their congregants is my dissertation title. But we have come a long way since 2005. God has really blessed both of us abundantly. I don't know about you, where I am today. God had given me a vision for where I am today. However, there are some things that's different than what I thought, and I'm okay with that. Now it's about allowing myself to continue to grow where God is leading me, because although I'm founder and CEO and working in ministry. at a church in Clearwater, there's still more that God has for me. And, I love the fact that God continues to grow me. One of the things I think that we learn through seminary is that you never stop learning. You always, keep learning and keep reaching for opportunities that God has for you. But what has become equally important to me is that I align myself with God's purpose for my life. So, and that might be an age thing, at some point in your life, you can't keep just doing things haphazardly. So I try to be very aware of what God is telling me to do now, and make sure that it's aligned with the vision and my philosophy for ministry. But I'm thankful. I want you to talk about a little bit more about your D-men that you're working on, because you just getting in there, and and I know you're excited, but
So I am really excited because, I love learning. I absolutely love learning. And first week, I've been through the first week, and it is the first African American cohort at Christian Theological Seminary. So once again, a forerunner, a pioneer. There has never been an all African American cohort in a D-Min program at CTS. So I'm excited about that, and mostly women. And I had been praying for a group of people and one man. I've been praying for a group of people that could be grounding for me as I'm doing the same thing. I'm on a journey. God has me on this journey. And so I always wanted a doctorate degree. I just did not know what in. And so I started to do the doctorate in education. And then I opened myself up to the possibilities of getting a D-Min degree with an emphasis in leadership and education, because that's currently what I'm doing. And I agree with you, and it's a lot of work. So let me say that it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that we're here, because I will be calling you and sounding board and support on those days that some days I wake up and I say, are you sure? And then I have to say, yes, God called you to this. Now, how do you align yourself up and get the rest you need? And one thing they said in the D-Men is make sure you maintain the relationships, because when it's said and done, it will be the relationships that will carry you through. You'll be done with your D-Men, but if you lose those important relationships, what all will it be worth? And so I'm excited about it, and I'm going to ask for your prayer, and I will be. Our first session was on leadership, so we read leadership books, and they were right on time, because I was like, oh my gosh. Let me see if I have in here. I don't have any of the leadership books here, but I do have one that I read, I'm Still Here, by Austin Channing Brown. Very normalizing as a African-American woman in leadership. Just all the things that I had already read, which was a reminder that I could be in a D-Min program, because it's been a while. It was kind of the same thing when we first got to seminary. It had been a while since my educational journey, getting back into it, strengthening the soul of your leadership, seeking God in the crucible of ministry. I recommend this book to people. It is an awesome book, and it's one that I will go back to. It's like a spiritual discipline. And so I was grateful for that. I would say we read another book, and forgive me, I can't, but in the book it stated, as a woman, you have to go above and beyond what is expected. And so having a D-Min is above and beyond what is expected for a woman in ministry. And so I see a lot of women in ministry with the D-Min. For those who haven't, why not? You don't have your MDiv, why not? If you are a chaplain, why aren't you board certified? I mean, just go to the next level, because even Jesus grew in stature and in wisdom and with God. And so we're not supposed to stop growing and learning. And so that's kind of my motto. And I get to take my time and do it.
Yeah, right.
pace myself,
Hmm.
and it is not a race,
That's right.
it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so just take my time and really learn. I don't want this to be just a check off the list. I want to get all that God wants me to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's good. That's rich. Because I know that as we continue to grow and learn more, then we become better in service. And that's really what this is all about. You may have heard us talking a lot about ourselves tonight, but what we hope that you heard was two women in ministry that are really just trying to do the will of God, be in the will of God, and do what God has called us to do, and to be a blessing to others. And I love Brianna's question. Brianna Robinson says, how do you find mentors to help you on your life after seminary journey? Use of books, conference, same, and all that. And Brianna, is so interesting. I love that question because, and Anastasia knows that when I came out of seminary, I was, while I was even in seminary, I couldn't find mentors, and I was asking women. I asked women, and I even stepped outside of the African American women in the church. I'm asking women, can you be my mentor? And I couldn't find anyone. So after seminary, one of the things I did start was Sound the Trumpet Ministries. You remember, Anastasia?
Yes.
Those were the good old days. And it was really to just help other women that were going through the seminary process and then to come out, because what a lot of women were going through after seminary was shell shock. It's like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And there was no one. So Brianna, I will say this to you: if you message me, I'd be more than happy to walk with you or point you in the direction. My sister here and Reverend Anastasia, we're busy, but like she's an educator. We both approach ministry from the love of God, and from understanding that part of our responsibility is to sow into others what people have sown into us.
Yes.
And so I would be more than happy to help you and help point you in the direction of conferences and different things, because I met some great women in different conferences, and there are different organizations and things that are around that can be a blessing to you. So Brianna, if you're still listening, please make sure that you send me a message, and I'll definitely respond back to you. Let me see what other question we have here. Yeah. And Anastasia, if you want to talk while I'm looking for
Yeah.
questions, that's fine.
When you say about mentoring, one book that I do give to women in ministry is by Reverend Dr. Teresa Phi Brown, Can a Sister Get Some Help?
Yes.
And it talks about the call to ministry, claiming voice, and it just talks about some of the pitfalls, how to be yourself. I just think that every woman in ministry should have that book as a guide on just some things they have to navigate as a woman in ministry. Um, as you, Reverend Rebecca, I have had, even now, I'm like, okay, Lord, where's my mentors? And what I find myself being a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
but not having a mentor in ministry, but I do have a mentor in, I would say, business. So
Yeah.
working in the hospital, I have a mentor there, but finding someone who is willing to give that time and
Right.
who does not see me as competition or a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been my hardest things. And what I end up doing is just having a group of women
Yeah.
that support, that care about me, that love me, who we could just be real. They know my cave experience and they
Right.
know me outside of the cave. And
Yes.
so that has become, sometimes I don't need a mentor. Sometimes God wants me to just rely on God and listen to God
Mm-hmm.
and to be with God in when it comes to ministry.
Right. Right.
So that's something that I'm aware of too.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it's 8:01. I do appreciate you having this conversation with me tonight. And what I want to make sure we do is the books that we talked about tonight. I want to make sure that we provide those in the chat. So if you send me the ones that you mentioned, I'll make sure that I post those in the comments section. Um, and I hope that perhaps we can do this again, because there's still so much more conversation to be had. I know I had a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about. Let me see here. Uh, but we talked about what we needed to talk about for this evening, and we'll definitely do this again. Thank you, Reverend Anastasia Holman, for being here tonight. I want you all to remember to check me out this Tuesday for Tuesday Together Talk. I have Pastor Kenny Irby coming, and he'll talk with us about truth and reconciliation hearings in and words from South Africa. And so he's going to share from his experience at the truth and reconciliation hearings, and also his theology of reconciliation. If you've been following us, you know that we've been really digging into reconciliation. So please make sure you follow us for Tuesday Together Talk, and then you can follow me on Facebook at Reconciliation and Equity, or you can check me out at www.reconciliationandequity.com. Anastasia, you have any closing words?
I do. I want to thank God for you and thank you for this opportunity. And I just want you to know I'm so proud of you. And may you continue. Wait a minute. Where is it? May you continue to do what is in your philosophy of ministry. Preaching is a dual process. On the one hand, I must attempt to change the soul of individuals so that their societies may be changed. On the other, I must attempt to change the society so that the individual soul will have a change.
Yes.
So may you continue to be authentic to God, your voice, and yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I get my preaching philosophy from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He wrote that when he was at Boston and studying for his doctorate. So that's where my ministry philosophy is derived from. Let's see here. Thank you, Niall. Hey, Lynn Martin, I hope that you're still there. Curtis Gray, hello. Let me see. Vincent Smith, Linda Nicholson, Marcus, Patsy, and Roz, and Rhonda, my mom. My mom said, I believe that God is mother and father. That's when she wrote that when we were talking about the inclusive language. So, but God bless you. I thank you for this opportunity. And just like you, I'm very proud of you, because what a lot of people don't realize is the work that goes into becoming a board certified chaplain, let alone a certified educator. So I'm more than excited, and I look forward to what God is going to continue to do through us, so that we can continue to do the work of kingdom building and bringing people to God, and also making sure that we are sowing in the lives of others. So God bless you, my sister.
God bless you.
All right, I'll see you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.